Good morning again. Today I'm going to be talking about something called planned continuation bias. Pilots know this, airplane pilots know this as get there-itis. You have a plan to land at a specific airport on a specific runway. And of course the plan unfolds long before you touch down. Pilots must go through checklists and a monitoring of instruments and the weather and listen to air traffic control. You set up for the touchdown long before you can see the runway. And to an outsider, to someone who's not flying the plane, it's so obvious. It's so clear that if a thunderstorm is right in front of you, move. Of course, if a thunderstorm is right in front of you, you should move. When you're not involved as a pilot, it's obvious that you should go around or evade or avoid or do something else. And indeed, the numbers bear it out, apparently, that it often only takes someone, one pilot, when a thunderstorm moves in front of an airfield, for someone to say, let's try to think differently here. Let's go around. Let's pause what we're doing. Let's try something else. And then everyone else will follow. But planned continuation bias is a little devil. We all know this. We recognize it. We got to get home. We got to get to a destination. We got to do it even when it's clear that it just isn't going to work. The SS Torrey Canyon, a large oil tanker, sank off the coast of Cornwall in 1967, the largest oil spill in the history of the United Kingdom, near the Isles of Scilly, a treacherous archipelago that has been the cause of many disasters due to stormy seas and sudden bad weather. But the Torrey Canyon, at the time one of the 10 largest oil tankers in the world, sank in calm waters on a clear day. Why? The shipmaster, while the captain was sleeping, committed to taking a path near the Isles of Scilly that he thought the captain had instructed him to take. The plan made absolutely no sense whatsoever. In the channel, near the Isles of Scilly, if they needed to turn, there was no escape plan. There was no room for any error at all. And eventually, they ran aground. In an effort to reduce the size of the oil spill, the British government decided to set the wreck on fire by means of airstrikes from the Air Force. The fire was repeatedly put out by high tides, and further strikes were needed to reignite the oil. The RAF administered 161 bombs, 16 rockets, 1,500 tons of napalm, and 44,000 liters of kerosene to get the ship to sink. Oil still showed up on the coasts of Spain, France, Wales, and England, killing an estimated 15,000 seabirds. In hindsight, obviously the ship was doomed. Fishermen reported seeing the tanker and being flabbergasted as they watched it take that particular route through the channel. Everybody knows it's too risky. Everyone can see that the ship was doomed, and yet there were multiple opportunities for the shipmaster first and then the captain later to avoid that channel. And with each and every moment that passed, the commitment to stay on the same exact course meant that it would be harder and harder and harder to change the path. An outsider could see it easily. It would obviously end badly. French and English fishermen on trawlers stood wide-eyed as they watched the Torrey Canyon slowly lumber towards running aground. All because the shipmaster and then the captain persisted with a plan that was never going to work. An outsider can jump up and down and say it's obvious. What are you doing? That's Zephaniah. Zephaniah is jumping up and down, yelling at the top of his voice, offering a terse summary to the people of Israel 2,600 years ago, that they might keep going the way that they're going. But there are significant consequences to that. What's wrong in ancient Israel? Well, it's the usual suspects. We've kind of read it all before. degeneracy of religious observation, lack of care for the poor, the widow, the orphan, the stranger, the kinds of things that the prophets usually are warning the people about. Hey, Zephaniah shouts, jumping up and down. You got to stop. You got to change. You're going to run aground. The judgment of the Lord, he says, will extend to all people. It will be catastrophic. Woe to the provoking city, he says, for she, and this is far better in the King James Version, for she hath not hearkened to the voice, neither hath she received discipline. That doesn't sound like our reading for today, though, does it? That sounded a lot more gentle when Armin read it, a lot nicer than that. We were probably quite into what Zephaniah had to say. Yes, the bit that Armin read earlier was the last handful of verses in the book of Zephaniah. Often known as the Song of Joy, it's what's dangled in front of the nation of Israel as a vision for what could happen. What could happen if they don't keep going the way that they're going. Nothing is assured. They could do everything right and things still may not work out. But if they change, the vision for what's possible is now opened up to them. Fear will be absent and shame will be turned to praise. There will be singing and love and restoration, maybe. Nothing's guaranteed. If the Israelites do everything right from this point on, it still might not work out, but there's a chance to turn this thing around. And if they do, then shame could be turned to praise. Their worship could be marked by singing and love. The United Church of Christ, the denomination to which we belong, was formed in 1957 through the merger of the Congregational and Evangelical Reformed churches. The 1950s marked the last high point in American church growth and attendance. The United Church of Christ is not an anomaly, but rather mirrors a broader trend towards consolidation and a long, lumbering dwindling in what we call mainline American Protestantism. Methodist, Lutherans, American Baptist, Presbyterian Church USA, and us and others. The United Church of Christ's national leadership recently sold its Cleveland headquarters. They're staying in the city, but they're moving. In 2000, the headquarters of the United Church of Christ housed a staff of 330 people. That number, 21 years later, is 117. I see the slide you have there, Dave. That says number of congregations, but if they all folded into each other, so there's half as many churches, but that probably means there's a larger average attendance or membership at those churches. This is the rate at which membership in the UCC has declined. An arrow that points upward is bad news. As you can see, there is no year in which it was less than a 5% rate of decline, and the line over the past 30 years suggests a loss of people that is running away in the wrong direction. In COVID, we've become used to talking about lagging indicators. A number here suggests that a number is coming later over here. If you've ever been involved in church leadership in any capacity at all, you know that in the UCC and in most churches, membership is a lagging indicator. We tend to keep people counted as members for years, sometimes many years, after they have in reality left the community. You can see in this slide that 4 years ago, the United Church of Christ had already dipped below 900,000 members, from a peak close to 3 million. This year, it went below 800,000. If membership is a lagging indicator of energy, participation, enthusiasm, and connection, the reality is, when combined with the previous slide showing the rate of decline, that if the official number is below 800,000 now, the actual number of active members is closer to 600,000. Sober projections, and the United Church of Christ is now saying this publicly, suggest that national membership will be below 200,000 within the next 20 years. But we're not dwindling, you might say. We're unioncong. Look at the solid stones of the facade. Look at these windows. Look at the talent of the section leaders. The choir, after so many months of being away from this space, is now finally making a joyful noise again. The Advent event last Sunday was wonderful as children moved from station to station joyfully making ornaments and just having fun together. Last Sunday we had a new member class for the first time since COVID started, and there was energy and enthusiasm for participation in the life of this congregation. But the trajectory is still clear. I didn't draw a graph for us today. I started, but I didn't finish. I started to plot the line for us, for membership and attendance at Union over the years. I sometimes like to draw that graph, and the reason for that is because there was a year when I was here when our attendance number was flat, and another when it went up a bit. And I might be tempted to thump my chest and say, "Yeah, look at me!" But it still declined over the last 6 years. And here's the truth. Here's the truth of the matter. Whether it was Dave Shaw, or Stephanie Weiner, or Jim Gilliam, or Betty Jane Bailey, or Bill Lutz, or Katrina Foreman, no matter who was on staff here, the overall trajectory did not change. It did not change with a different president of the congregation. It did not change with a different personnel chair. It didn't change because of a large national event. There was no clear and obvious moment when the long, lumbering trajectory of slow dwindling was halted. I didn't include last year's pandemic, so 2019 will have to do. Whatever has happened in the last couple of years, it didn't ultimately result in growth, flourishing, prospering, at least on Sundays. About 600 people gathered here on Sundays in 1960 and about 130 in 2019. Yes, there were little dots, 2% increase in 2017, for example. The decade with the largest decline, both as a raw number and percentage, was the 1960s. I don't say that to lay the blame at anyone's feet. It's merely to suggest that long trajectory of lumbering dwindling has been in motion since JFK was elected president. It's not all bad. It's not all bad. There's plenty of joyous moments that we are having and have had in our life together here. There is a lot happening. Some of you may have been frustrated by the fact that worship didn't really seem to get going until about 10:14 today because we had these number of announcements and we still feel like we didn't do justice to everything that's happening in the bulletin. There's plenty to hang your hat on. And I can understand pointing to various moments of happiness and joy and celebration and sense of belonging and friendship and education, worship and service, and for almost any single one of us point towards moments and experiences and services and lessons and prayers and say, I felt joy. We were doing a good thing together and it was beautiful. And you would be absolutely 100% correct. And in fact, we can keep going. Doing what we have been doing. We can keep doing everything that we do now, and we can have fun, and we can make meaning together, and it will be beautiful and joyful. Because for a lot of us, despite what you may hear about what church is like, for many of us, church is joyful. But it's important to tell the truth. If we follow the model we have followed for 60 years, we can track roughly when we will run out of energy to support this building, these programs, this governance model, these committees, our ministry. I did not say that we can track when we will run out of money, but when we will run out of energy. If the variables stay roughly the same, you can see it on a chart if you want to make it for yourself. We will run out of energy before we run out of money. Because most UCC churches, of those 4,500 that have closed in the last several decades, they run out of energy before they run out of money. The majority of churches that close in the United Church of Christ have a six-figure sum in their checking account. So let's be clear, transparent, and brutally honest. We can keep doing what we are doing. We can have fun and we can do meaningful things together. We can worship with celebration and joy. We can keep praying together. We can keep doing exactly as we are doing now. It'll be fun for many of us. And it's chaplaincy work. It's about dying well. It's about dying with dignity, dying with vitality, dying with some flexing, some chest thumping. Look at what we're doing. But it's dying. Or we can consider a different way of approaching church based on our strengths and the needs of the world and the needs of our people that might change the trajectory of that long and slow dwindling after all. Right now, the Strategic Planning Steering Committee is finishing a visioning document that will go to the Leadership Council for their input and approval in the coming weeks. In January, around the middle of the month, you will all have an opportunity to view, review that vision, and offer your thoughts, your feedback, and your wisdom to the documents. And together we will gain clarity about the strategy that is behind our ministry and programming in the coming months and years. So why are you telling me this now, Dave? If that's January and it's December and it's the third Sunday of Advent, it's the Sunday of joy, man. It's Pink Candle Sunday. Why are you telling me this now? Yeah. And next Sunday is the pageant and Betsy, and we are going to enjoy it. And the following weekend is Christmas, and the following is New Year. And we have to sit with this. We have to just sit with this reality for a little bit. Everybody here surely has had a moment when you realized a difficult truth that was staring you in the face. In recovery communities, they call it a moment of clarity, right? And moments of clarity stink. They're usually terrible in the moment. The unvarnished truth is often deeply uncomfortable. And you grow from there. If the weight of the truth is allowed to wash over you so that you can accept it and surrender to it, then you can grow from there. It might get better. It might not, but it might get better. Our moment of clarity is when we come to know for sure as a community, without a shadow of a doubt, that we will run aground. Just as surely as the Torrey Canyon would when it entered the channel near the Eyes of Scilly in 1967. In the cold, sober light of hindsight, everyone knew that the Torrey Canyon would sink. It was just so obvious when you looked at the facts and understood the variables. The fishermen on the French and English trawlers jumped up and down, shouted into their radios. Everyone could see the ship slowly lumbering towards its end. Everyone could see it, except the people on the boat. Where's the joy in this? Where's the joy in this? We get to figure it out together. We get to figure it out in our prayers. We get to figure it out relying on the wisdom of the Spirit. We get to continue our ministry together no matter what we decide in the coming weeks and months. We get to sing together. We get to visit one another. We get to help refugees and asylum seekers and do acts of justice and kindness. We get to be generous together. We get to hear Scripture and offer proclamations of hope together. It's not like if we choose the path of the Torrey Canyon, we can't enjoy it. Put some music on the speakers, play the violin, clink glasses, and toast our many good acts of devotion and love. And if we choose a different path, a different kind of model and trajectory, it still might not work out in the end. But we will do our best to rejoice in the goodness of God, life, and human hope and resilience. And no matter what we do, our rejoicing together shall be in God, in God's goodness, in God's wisdom. May we rejoice in the truth, the unvarnished, unblemished truth. Peace be with you.